So we're both in this kind of fairly weird, well, it's not weird, but it's fairly niche, liminal space between being musicians and also sort of nerdy, techie inventor of instruments. And you know, there's a few people in this zone. I mean, we were hanging out yesterday with Daz, Beardy Man, who's also in this zone.
Yeah.
So there's like a small gaggle of us.
It feels like a short list, though. When I first met Daz in San Francisco, like 2 years ago, we had the conversation, and he mentioned you and Imogen, and he mentioned Onyx
Ashanti.
Yeah, and then I mentioned a few other people I know in the States.
Yeah.
Aren't really quite, well, yeah, there's a few I can think of, but yeah, I could probably count everyone on both my hands. The people that are doing it full time and doing it in really ambitious ways on both sides of it.
Yeah. Although I get a feeling that there might also be an element of like, so we've sort of been doing it for a few years, and like, you know, all the people you just mentioned have been doing it for quite a while. But I think I get the feeling that there's this like new generation of I was going to say the K word, kids, doing it, but in this kind of new way. Well, I think, for example, like a lot of the Eurorack things, like I met the Bastel Instruments guys the other day. Bastel Instruments,
Eurorack makers, kind of bedroom manufacturers.
Yeah. They're based in Prague in the Czech Republic, but they do. I mean, they're nuts. I mean, they're proper sort of dyed-in-the-wool rulebook ripper-uppers. Mm-hmm. So they do stuff. One of their modules, they use they trigger solenoid, like magnetic solenoids. So you actually like
it's a mechanical.
It's a mechanical thing. So you can send a gate signal into a mechanical thing. So you could make a Eurorack modular thing to kind of play your kitchenware.
Oh, I get it. Cool.
Yeah, they've got this kind of mentality of just sort of they went to art school, so actually kind of art school guys. So they've got this whole aesthetic thing. They're like they're coming from like an overtly aesthetic approach to things, and they've tacked on engineering skills on the top of it. Whereas I think, and that's also because that's how you came to this way of working, right?
Yeah, engineering is all self-taught, and just have a background in music composition and electronic stuff. Which I think makes for really interesting stuff. I don't know why that is, but yeah, it makes sense. The Eurorack stuff is really inspiring. Also in that realm, like I have friends who write iOS apps, and it seems like that platform, iOS and Android, just having mobile devices with so many sensors and rich input devices has given all these people a platform to like create instruments that are disseminated in copies of hundreds of thousands or millions, and I think that's pretty amazing to be able to make instruments and distribute them that far and wide.
Like actually from a musician's point of view rather than an engineer's point of view. Yeah. And to sort of I don't know. So because you don't, I guess when you make an instrument from a musician's point of view, you're not really you're not primarily thinking about your market in a way, and I think that's actually the thing that sort of leads to kind of like new markets in inverted commas, like Eurorack stuff. It is actually people just doing what the hell they want to do, and just like I want a thing. I want a thing that allows me to smash glasses with my Eurorack or stuff like that, and then these ideas get out there and they inspire people, and then suddenly, and sort of like markets kind of form downstream from that, and then you get this more kind of commercial approach. Very similar to what happened with the Monome. Brian Crabtree comes up with the Monome. There's this big community comes up, and now like the pad grid is everywhere pretty much.
Yeah, it is. I bring that up as the best example of like, here's a totally new musical interface that didn't exist 8 years ago, and is now totally ubiquitous and people are always asking me like, what's next and what is the future?
Mm.
And my hope is that other instruments like that get established, like, because they're already here. People just aren't really using them popularly as, you know, on stage or as folk instruments. Like I played with the Mimu gloves, Kelly Snook's place, and that whole world of gestural stuff, either wearables or camera, you know, computer vision, however you do it, just the, you know, wider gestures that your body can make as a controller, or like the multi-touch, multi-dimensional sensitive surfaces, like the continuum and the instrument. And I think there's like 5 or 6 categories of these new instruments that are gonna be real things, like the mono and the copies of the mono.
I mean, I don't kind of. It's almost like I don't sort of understand the implications of all this technology. Like I know that there are people who have a vision for you know, like the Rolly Seaboard Rise, and the cheaper Seaboard, and the Harken Continuum, and the instrument, and the, you know, the Mimu gloves and so on. Like, you know, Imogen Heap, you know, she's got this like really broad vision for what she or at least what she wanted the gloves to be for her, and then that kind of like ended up becoming a vision of what she wanted the gloves to be for everyone. And I think, you know, I don't know, it kind of makes me feel a bit old, really. But I sort of like I get it, but I get it, you know, I get it with my head. I get, like, there's parts of my cortex that get it, but somehow I'm just like kind of, I think I'm waiting to see I'm waiting to see that thing, and I know it's going to happen. You know, I know it's just around the corner. That thing where someone does something with the gloves or the Seaboard Rise or one of these instruments that basically it needs someone to adopt it, not just for a couple of months to hack together a prototype, but like for a couple of years or 5 years and really master it, and then blow us all out of the water with an amazing performance from like a musical perspective, isn't just like a proof of concept.
Yeah, I feel like that's coming, honestly. Like, I thought it was coming a lot sooner, but maybe that's me being impetuous. But I think it's starting to happen. I mean, exactly what you describe is what I anticipate happening, because, you know, instruments like the electric guitar didn't really come into its own until like Jimi Hendrix just sort of changed the whole nature of it with overdrive and effects and just twisting it into sounds that nobody had ever done before. And there's people with that kind of relationship to all kinds of instruments. And that's one of the things that really inspired me about Daz's stuff, is I feel like looping has been around. I mean, I know like Les Paul and like a lot. They, you know, I don't know who the first loopers are. I'm not like a big looping person, but it's been around since as long as tape, and people have been performing with it for almost that long, and now it's evolved into all these weird places. I thought it was bad that it was stuck in pedals, so now I'm glad it's more in iPads and other machines. But looping to me is one of those instrument categories, and it's only in like the last 10 or 15 years that I've seen people do like totally mind-blowing, super compelling performances, and you're one of the artists I put in that realm. I mean, you're also poking at all these other different things. You're like
multiple round poker.
Exactly, like you're doing a lot more than just looping, but yeah, that virtuosity, like, I haven't seen, you know, the Seaboard Rise player who's just like, you know, blown me away, but hopefully they're...
Well, there's actually the demo, the guy who does a lot of the demos, Heen, he's kind of mastered it in terms of playing. We did a little jam together at Music Tech Fest about this time last year, actually, so he was playing the Seaboard, not the Rise, it was before the Rise was launched, and he was playing it through the Flow machine, and that was really, you know, I got a sense of it. Definitely got a sense of it there. But there's somehow this kind of, he said, when someone does something really new, and it's not just a proof of concept, it's like new and fully sick.
There's got to be, it feels like there's just got to be a confluence of all these kind of things, you know, because you couldn't lock yourself away somewhere and study one of these instruments and become a master of it and then just show up and be like, hey, I'm here, I'm the greatest continuum player ever.
Yeah.
Tell what you want me to tour with you, you know, famous, lucrative, mainstream pop band.
Yeah.
They'd be like, yeah, no, you've been living in a cabin for 10 years. I don't want to hang out with you.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm theorizing, but...
Well, no, I think... but it's an interesting point, though, because another interesting thing that's happened with the gloves, and this kind of... This sort of... I think it reflects more on, like, Imogen as a character, in that, you know, because she's so kind of public-facing. She's, like, adventurous and pop.
Yeah.
And public-facing. With her adventurousness and so on, and that's led to, for example, so you know Ariana Grande, like
Kelly told me a lot about her.
So she's been using the gloves in her on her tour. And there's this, I don't know, I haven't seen the show. It's I wouldn't particularly put myself in slap bang in the middle of the Ariana Grande demographic, but she's been using the gloves. And so, you know, a whole bunch of kids. I mean, I think it's a fairly simplistic way, but it's compelling and theatrical. You know, so I hear from what Kelly Snook said.
Maybe we're like modular. Well, early synthesizers were in like the 60s or the 70s. You know, where I imagine the first time they made it on the big stages, they were more of a novelty, and it was like, what is that thing? You know, or like we play a theremin for one song, and people are just like, what? What is that? You know? So there's always a novelty with new stuff, but enough people get into it and it sticks around, and then it seeps in. I think also there's a thing about like it has to kind of be a folk instrument in a way. Like I don't hear people use that word a lot, but that's what I think it is. When like every bedroom producer for like $100 can buy a button grid, RGB, you know, fancy, pressure sensitive button grid, then it's a folk instrument, and then it's something that like you can buy for your kid instead of a toy piano, or you know, you can go to your friend's house and jam. And I think, I don't know, but that might change the way that it's perceived in the world and the way that people approach it as an instrument. Like that piano, right? Like that used to be the thing to have in your home. You know, and there's something about that when like everybody knows the instrument and everybody's had a chance to play as a child. That when you go and see somebody who can blow your mind with that instrument, like it probably hits you on a really deep level because you have a connection with it.
Absolutely. And I think this is one of the massive challenges of kind of the way the whole music tech world works these days, because you've got this whole product cycle, and you know, if you're a profitable mainstream company, you want your product cycle to be as short as possible until you come up with a new thing. But the problem with that is that it's completely antithetical to you know, making instruments that stay the same and because you know, the piano needs to stay the same probably for about 20 years. You need to be using exactly the same interface, and for that exact same interface and sound and whole like sound generation engine to be in every concert hall all over the world. And it's like that kind of super stable infrastructure, like instrument infrastructure, if you like. That's what leads to, you know, that's what needs to Chopin. That's what needs to incredible instrument players who become incredible at playing that instrument. And I think like that's what I want to do, you know, with the flow machine and so on. It's like eventually get to this instrument that is exactly the same all the time, and then you can get into this mastery zone, hopefully, and then really master it. But I think that's probably partly why I've got into just sort of completely. I don't change my interfaces regularly, and I don't really use, you know, I don't use Ableton. I just use this kind of like sprawling software that I built, and it's somehow I don't know. It's in a way I've kind of got my head buried in the sand. It's a bit of a sort of ostrich thing, or just because
you're making your own stuff, you mean, or?
Well, yeah, it's almost like it's a sort of it's like there's sort of agoraphobia. It's like a sort of marketplace agoraphobia.
Agoraphobia is the fear of
like wide spaces, you know, or fear of like kind of big crowded space with lots of people, and it's just like as soon as I kind of get out of my little zone, it's just there's all these products and all these new technologies. Like every week, there's something new.
I'm the same way. Like I've been developing the same controller that started out as a keyboard that I modified that became a custom thing for like, if you go all the way back, it's like my whole, career playing that thing, like 10 years or something. But like, I don't think that's burying your head in the sand. I mean, I feel that way sometimes when people are like, look at this cool, amazing thing I can do with the touch screen, or, look at all the live looping I'm doing. I don't really do live looping, but I think that's the like musician's quest to kind of like specialize and become really good at a thing. I mean, I think that's you doing what you're describing, which is trying to create a consistency in the thing that you play so that the way you can play it can become natural and intuitive, and like your performances will be the thing that we all love, which is, seeing a human interfacing with an instrument in some amazing way that that maybe we've never seen before on a level that we've never seen before. So no, this is if that's burying your head in the sand, then that's all the great musicians who spent their 10,000 hours, practicing scales and stuff.
Yeah.
I think it's admirable.
Yeah, no, I think it is. I mean, it's a bit of a devil's advocate point of view, because I think it, like, having that mentality can end up, at certain points you can sort of go a bit far of really, you can dig so deep that it's actually impossible to come back up to the surface again and show people what you've done.
I understand. So what you're doing speaks to me on that level.
Yeah.
but that's okay, man. I mean the fact that you're able to like spin it out into things, that I can use, that anyone can use. That means you haven't gone too deep. Maybe you've gone too deep to explain them, to casually to someone like me who doesn't have as much experience with DSP and, software as you do. But I think it's fantastic. I think that's where the coolest stuff comes from. 10 years from now, I bet there'll be people. I mean, because a lot of what I do was kind of derived from your work. Like,
oh right,
yeah,
right.
Like watching your video 2005 with early Flow Machine, and then like the parts of your Reactor ensemble that you made public, and working with another Reactor programmer to basically copy like what was happening with your key masher. I think that's always going to be happening in some regard, and maybe that's the crucial part in the evolution of these instruments, where maybe what you're doing now is kind of like wild and esoteric and harder for people to grasp than a button grid that you trigger samples with something super simple, but but so were like early modular synthesizers, and probably so were like the piano. Like, what? I gotta learn to play with dynamics. Like, just give me a harpsichord and I'm cool. I'm sticking with the harpsichord. None of this like dynamic madness. It's too much for me.
That comes back to what you were saying earlier about this folk, the folk music, this folk idea, talking about folk interfaces, cheap pad grids, or like not cheap, affordable pad grids for all. But then also with with folk music, you've got this accessibility, but then you've also got this kind of it's very spontaneous. It's all about performance and about real time. It's not about this kind of it's not the perfect folk album. Yeah. So that, I guess, like the center point of a folk musician's career will be them performing their instrument at a moment in a place in front of a certain bunch of people. Yeah. And that's at the core of the folk vision. So your vision is kind of
it's kind of folky.
Yeah, it's kind of folk. Yeah, but not in the pejorative sense of because be the pejorative sense. But
you described it really elegantly. Like, there's a certain beauty to that I think is amazing, and that's the beauty that originally inspired me to get deeply into music, and so I'm trying to kind of like recapture that, and that's and I love that whole concept, especially the way that you just described it, and that's why it's taken me so long to do this, is because I get distracted by these opportunities to create those musical situations, like making the guitar wing, right? Like that's not an instrument for me to perform with. It's like an affordable, adaptable, spin-off of this guitar that I designed and co-designed with a guitar maker. But it was such a good opportunity to like make a new folk instrument. You know, here's the guitar controller that like, you know, everybody could afford, and that's gonna, I think, change the way a lot of people play guitar, and that's a cool opportunity. So
yeah,
I went for that, and I do these other thing called jam boxes, these like multiplayer drum circle kind of looking things.
Yeah,
and that's the same idea where it's like it's making music really accessible for people, and it's making it a real-time thing. And with those, it's also a collaborative thing, which I think is pretty magical too. That's not necessarily part of the folk music thing,
I don't know. I think there's because it's folk. I mean, it's when you talk about folk music, it kind of veers in this slightly political direction. You know, there's definitely a sort of always feel there's this kind of like you know, it's community based. It's about, you know, there's a sort of tinge of equality to it. There's a tinge of sort of like socialist tinge to it, and but about, you know, empowering people and communities and so on. Well, I don't know, actually. I think for somebody like Venetian Snares comes to mind now. Like when Venetian Snares kind of first blew everyone away in like, well, not everyone, everyone within a certain niche of extreme breakcore. He was just like churning stuff out. And I think he was just like a machine for a while. So I think, you know, some people do just like catch this like thread of energy that just is like this kind of spewing lava. It's like a volcano of creativity and stuff that is, you know, like high quality. It's like high quality and fast and furious and just keeps happening. I mean, I think it's kind of like you know, like all the you know, the rock stars that die age 27, Kurt Cobain, Amy Winehouse, Jimi Hendrix. I think that, you know, they also have this, they somehow tap into like the main vein of the universe, like the main vein. Oh my god, just this movie. Somehow like the main vein of this, like this sort of divine, like the divine creativity, like the big creativity, you know. If you believed in God, it would be God. If, you know, we're both Buddhists in some sense. I don't know. Would you describe yourself as a Buddhist?
I generally do, but not. You know, I always condition it with like, you know, I don't know, but more like philosophically than ritualistically. Right. I say like, well, I'm a meditator and I'm kind of a Buddhist or something like that. Yeah. But yeah, I am.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
Dharma.
The Dharma. That's probably I guess for
Kurt Cobain was really in touch with the.
He was really in touch with. Yeah. Oh man. Well, I could go on this hard. Obviously, you know, having discovered the Dharma, well, I don't know, 5 years ago now. Well, it was actually around that period I was just talking about when I just sort of went a bit crazy and slightly lost it and burnt out a bit.
Where was it on that sort of arc of amazingness?
Well, it's probably. Well, I think there's this sort of weird. There's always this weird kind of like counter. There's this weird contradiction that actually, like in 2009, 2010, I was actually pretty unhappy a lot of the time. I was touring. I the kind of bad stuff going down with the relationship, you know, and not being in touch with my friends, meeting, you know, different people every night. Great, but you just don't get to form lasting relationships, which is what you really need if you're going to stay sane and feel loved, you know. It doesn't kind of, you end up living a very thin life and it's all about the show and so yeah, I found that I actually, like, from a personal point of view, I just found that really hard. I sort of withered a bit. It was like kind of after that period, and, you know, I left Berlin, moved back to London, and I live now like 5 minutes away from the London Buddhist Centre. I just started going along there, and it's just become more and more of a thing. The Dharma, but yeah, having been involved with it for 5 years, I guess whenever you first get involved with something, you're just like, oh my god, this is the right thing in big capital letters, and everybody should do the right thing.
Yeah.
And you think that all you need to do is like tell everyone about the right thing, and then everyone's life will be solved. And of course, it's like completely not true at all.
Yeah.
But then I do sometimes think, what if Kurt Cobain had discovered the Dharma and meditation and so on? Amy Winehouse, well, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, that's life, right? Or that's karma or whatever, can't. Yeah, it's good to have maybe examples like that. So, so I don't feel so bad about being significantly older than 28 and not having played any stadiums.
Yeah.
Actually, one of the ways I held back when I started making videos of a similar nature, I made much more elaborate kind of demonstrations to help people understand it, and I gave them like reactor ensembles and Ableton templates that I created, but I didn't give them the sample library. Like one thing I was doing kind of like what you're doing at one point, taking like pop music and break beats and just like all different kinds of stuff and mashing it together as a performance. And I felt this kind of like loyalty to like musicianship and these people I went to university with, kind of where they you take your music business class and the first thing you talk about was like how terrible it was that hip hop started sampling and it's like just this weird different approach to reappropriation and remix and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I kind of carried that through in my performance and put up these barriers around my recordings and said I will never sell recordings of this stuff because I didn't generate the sound content, and then I decided not to give away the whole everything that I was performing with. One, because of that, and two, because kind of like you, I think it felt like building this meticulous sample library. That's what it was like cataloging all these things by tempo and key and time stretching, putting markers in them to time stretch them and setting them up to mix well, blend well with other samples. Like all that organizational time felt like something I just wasn't ready to give away because it felt too close to my creative output, my creative identity or whatever.
Yeah, it's an identity thing.
Yeah.
But I've definitely seen that. I mean, the approach you've taken, I think it's been a lot more sort of. It's been a lot more generous than mine, I think, quite honestly. You set up controllerism.com. You really ran this as a community and put a lot of effort into that.
Yeah, but the weird thing about that is it never got. I just wrote this, history of it, like as I was telling you, I'm about to shut down the site, and so I'm trying to think back through all these, important moments in it as it relates to the site. It's kind of weird because the site's always been just kind of like this little thing off on the side, they're like, oh, I have all these cool people are sending me cool videos. Well, here's a place to publish the cool videos. Or like, oh, people have decided controllerism is like only a thing that digital DJs do, and it's like, I feel like controllerism is a much broader thing. So I was like, I gotta produce a bunch of content, put it up there and tell people what controllerism is and isn't. And, it's always been off on the side, but as far as being generous, I don't know. Oh, what I was going to say is that the site never became super successful. It was a forum for a while. It was kind of successful. It was a blog for a while. It was kind of successful. We did an event. It was kind of successful. But it never blew up. And that's because I was never interested in like exploiting it commercially and never put the energy in to do that and never partnered with somebody, like a company that's already established as a blog or as a forum to kind of make it a bigger thing. And so, in a way, I don't know if it's selfish or generous to take your work and maybe channel it through a more, some kind of like commercial venture, because capitalism is the system around us, and And I think you can go into something with great intent, you know, like I went into the Guitar Wing project with like the intent of like making this kind of instrument accessible to lots of people. And I knew that wasn't about like, oh, well, I'll make a video that teaches you how to build your own, or, you know, I'll explain all the concepts behind it, and then hopefully someone else will take you to the next step and productize it, you know. It was like, no, the easiest way to do it is like get together with people who know how to make music products, you know, take it from instrument idea into product zone, and then sell it to people at what is hopefully like a fair and competitive price. So, you know, I don't know, that's where I see like your software partnerships with Native Instruments living, and as you said, they've been successful enough for you to kind of, you know,
to live off,
live off of and keep doing your work, and that's fantastic in my view.
I think it's, I mean, I guess, you know, as you get as one gets older, there's this sort of general phenomenon that there's, to map it onto like the traditional political spectrum, that you sort of basically get more right wing as you get older. I certainly wouldn't describe myself as right wing, but I think the idea of like, you know, sort of commercial exploitation, I kind of understand the place of it now a lot more, and that I mean, you know, open source is really great, and you know what you're talking about, this idea of sort of putting ideas out there in the spirit of generosity, and then seeing if people will take them to the next level, is a really great thing to do. And if I'm honest about it, I wish I was generous-hearted enough to start engaging in that way of doing things a bit more. But then also having seen kind of, having gone through the commercial process, and you've done as well, you know, it does actually lead to things that will be, you know, just work better for more people in a much wider range of situations, and will probably be more affordable, and will take people who just want to get their hands on this thing. It will just take them less time to get their hands on this thing and do whatever they want to do downstream with that thing once they've got it. So in a way, it's, you know, if you want to build platforms of opportunity for people to explore, you know, if you want to sort of create shoulders for people to stand on, I think I'm a lot more sold on like the commercial route nowadays. And you know, when I was in my 20s, I was just like, you know, I think it seems like most people who are artistic, you know, have an artistic, idealistic outlook on things, generally will be sort of fairly staunchly anti-capitalist and anti-commercialism, anti-everything when they're young.
Well, I'm more interested in like dividing my time and resources and feeling like it's a benefit to society. I had a whole crisis with that. Like, I guess I didn't talk much about my coming to the Dharma. I want to hear about your coming to the Dharma. But it happened at a similar like dark point in my life. It was, there was a really difficult relationship ending thing happening. My sister passed away in a really kind of dramatic kind of way. And I just moved out to San Francisco from New York City, and there were the kind of stresses of moving, and that was also when the economy kind of crashed, and suddenly like the difficulty of like, I'm in a new city and I need work, combined with like nobody I know is getting work of the kind that I want to do. It was just like a really, really horrible place, and I was pretty miserable for like 2 years actually. And then I have a cousin who's a Lutheran minister, and she was the first person I'd spoken to who just had this like extreme clarity of, you know, what's really important in this life. And, you know, she lives this life of service, which is really inspiring to me. And she wasn't like, you should join my Lutheran church. She was like, you need to find a path. You're like a spiritual person and you're suffering deeply, and you need some, you know, we need some education basically. Wow. And that's when I started. I went to my first kind of like long silent meditation course.
It was Goenka.
Yeah, it was Essen Goenka course, 10 days, and I was just blown away. It had it was the most beneficial thing I'd experienced in those 2 years. And then I started a daily practice and felt like it was finally processing, you know, all this grief and sadness and stuff that had just built up and not been released. So yeah, so that was a huge turning point. And why are we talking about this again?
Well, I just want to. I mean, it's.
No, I remember it was about generosity and what I do with.
But no, carry on with the Dharma life story. I mean, it makes my heart open. So please carry on. Good.
Well, yeah. So then I decided, like, okay, this is the most important thing in my life. Suddenly it was replaced. You know, it used to be like, oh, my art is the thing. You know, and then there's like relationships with, you know, partners or family and friends and all that stuff. And now suddenly it was like, no, spiritual practice, spending like 2 hours in silence every day is the most important thing in my life. And, you know, and then, you know, it still takes a lot of effort to keep this kind of career going. So that was like number 2. So this is a whole shifting of priorities. It shifted my lifestyle a lot, you know, like, you know, suddenly I'm abstaining from all, you know, doing the Goenka thing and abstaining from all intoxicants and these other precepts. So, you know, it changed my relationship with like drugs and alcohol, which were this kind of undercurrent of, you know, parties and festivals, and this is what people do, and this is how we, you know, sacraments, how we bond and all this stuff. And suddenly, like, I need new ways to do that. And just meditating that much changes your whole experience of life on a continuous basis. So suddenly, like, yeah, you know, like my circle of friends began to shift. My intimate relationships changed a lot. Like, didn't have a girlfriend or a partner, anyone like that for several years, and yeah, just changed all these things. And then there was a reassessment of my career too. I think that's why I started talking about it, is because suddenly it was like, what am I doing with my life? Like, how is this helping me and helping others? Is this just an egoistic thing carrying over from like high school where I wanted to be a rock star, you know, and I just wanted people to think I was cool and to pay me for doing something fun, you know? I think those were like the reasons I decided to do music. And, you know, in the context of, you know, this bigger, more conscious kind of picture, it's like, why am I doing this, and what good can I do, if possible, with this career path, with this livelihood? So I started having to reassess it and saying, like, what's the real value of this this kind of work? And it took a while. It was kind of a crisis. It was like, maybe I should quit this. Maybe I should start working in a hospital or a Buddhist temple or something. Yeah. But eventually I came back to like, no, like art serves a really important function in society. For me, it was therapy, you know. The darkest point in my life before this one I'm describing now was like when my parents split up and my family kind of fell apart when I was a teenager. And art for me then was this way to like, music was this way for me to like work through these negative emotions and do something creative with them. And that still kind of is that. And I think that's a valuable service, is to like show, either through doing it or teach people through, you know, explaining things or demonstrating things or inspiring them, you know, giving them tools and inspiration to kind of do the same thing and take negative energies and transmute them into something positive. So yeah, so that, you know, that I like to think is like the motivating factor in doing the things that I do and trying to find a way to be a musician, an artist, an instrument builder in a way that serves. And that's not really easy. And when that bumps into capitalism or post-capitalism, which I'm intrigued by, how do you mitigate that?
Yeah.
But this is the question I come back to is, so with a viewpoint like that, which I imagine you might share some of, like, how do you direct your energies? Like, you know, are you trying to give some of the money from Flesh to your local meditation group, or are you trying to make Flesh a tool that inspires other people to, you know,
well, both,
do better things with their life and more creative things? Or,
there's a bit of both. I mean, I do give to the Buddhist Center, to the movement. There's a actually in the Triratna movement at the moment, which is a movement that I'm involved with. There's a bit of a discussion about like a more structured way of giving and so on, which is generally giving. I think some people say 5% or 10% of income. Anyway, I roughly give, I roughly give like 10% of what I earn to the movement, like various different projects around the movement. But
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, but I get so much out of it, and there's this weird thing with generosity that you always end up getting more back if you really give, even in the situations where you doubt, where you don't really want to give. Sometimes somehow you kind of get more back. But anyway, the sort of, I don't know, the economics of generosity is kind of like one of many things to figure out when. I suppose when, it's I just have to say, it's just so wonderful to hear you hear someone else, like anyone else, talking about this experience of like having this sort of artistic entrepreneurial career and then running into the Dharma. Because I feel, I suppose most people do feel like they have a particularly unique relationship with any religious institution if they run into it. But when I go to the Buddhist Center, I'm sort of always thinking like, God, how the hell does my life fit my life as it is, as a guy who will fly somewhere to do a gig and fly back and then will like release some plugin and has a presence on social media and it does all these things that sort of on the face of it just seem so kind of contrary to the principles of the Dharma.
Contrary?
Well, I don't know. I'm kind of showing up my own stupidity here because they're not really contrary to the Dharma. They don't really contradict the Dharma. But they sort of feel, I guess it's this kind of guilt, this sort of weird like middle class guilt, or like what we might call a sort of the creative class guilt in inverted commas.
Like you feel like you're doing like privileged kind of
the sort of privilege thing, kind of just feeling a little bit awkward about, because I've been so been so freaking lucky really to do the things that I to have got to do the things that I've done, and to earn a living from it. Such a lucky position to be in, and a sort of, I guess when you come across something as such like with such kind of bright white purifying light as the Dharma, and spiritual practice, and it slightly makes me quiver and just like, no, I'm basically all I'm doing, I'm just sort of feathering my nest.
Wow. You still feel like that?
Well, a bit less so. Less so. It's just one of these things. It'll never. It's like a sort of logarithmic curve. It'll never completely disappear. But hopefully, like the more I practice, the more I try to figure out like how the Dharma fits with my work. Then the more it'll. I don't know. The more it'll make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's like because you change in ways you never know. You can't like once you like adopt a spiritual practice, you can't map out how you're going to change. All you can do is like give yourself to the practice, and like have faith, and not like belief style faith as in like faith in God. But it's just like faith that the methods that you're practicing will change you and will change you in good ways. But in ways that you won't know, that you can't even comprehend from your current perspective right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is this a natural conclusion? It doesn't feel very conclusive.
Well, yeah. I mean, when do you ever reach real conclusions?
Yeah, I was about to say something to that effect.
It's sort of
this conversation will be reborn again and again and again.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, the wheel of life will come around, and we'll all be left in a state of sort of, I was going to say permanent confusion, but like very, very slightly diminishing confusion.
I like the logarithmic curve picture of. I think you're talking about doubt, basically.
Yeah,
to generalize.
Yeah. That's it, isn't it? It's like it's doubt.
Yeah,
that's a stinker.
The
hindrances. Yeah. Well, I mean, because doubt is said to be like the hindrance that underpins all the other 5 hindrances.
Yeah.
And we're getting super technical here. I mean, I think in terms of like audiences who know about music, music tech, instrument building, and the Dharma, I think we are our own audience now.